Hi, my name is Finchley Hall. You already know me. I'm in your class. This is Ethan Suddy. He works at the Vaughn's fuel station in PB. He's 20 years old, just like me. He is currently living in a pandemic from being 20 years old. And I'm going to specifically talk with him about what it's like living in a current pandemic of 20 years old with a brother and with the circumstances that we're all in individually. First question is, do you feel like you have more or less freedom right now, given the current situations in a global pandemic, than you would, say, living on your own in 2016 if you were, say, 20? Do you feel more or less restricted by your freedom of adulthood, but considering the circumstances of, what's going on around you?
I think I have probably more freedom, and I think that, despite everything that's happened, I'm the way I am because of the way history played out, and okay. I kind of like the way that I turned out. I mean, the circumstances are awful, but the way the things I've overcame and the things that I've learned from what I've had to deal with over this past year and even other years is it's really changed me, I think, for the better. So while I wish that things would have played out differently in the past, I think the way moving forward, I think I probably have a better grasp on things. I definitely am not the same person that I was last year, and I didn't think I would be able to say that. But
do you think most of those things that you've had to confront are due, in part due to a pandemic, or just and also in line with adulthood, more specifically?
Some of the things are circumstantial, but they were definitely inflated by when COVID struck. It definitely had an impact on pretty much almost everything. I mean, it didn't really affect me in a lot of ways that it affected other people. For example, I haven't lost anybody to COVID. I'm very fortunate to have not lost anybody close to me just yet, but it's a very serious issue, and I'm sorry. What was the question?
The question was, do you think most of the situations or scenarios that you find yourself in that are extremely troubling to you, being an adult of 20, are due or mostly in part due to this current pandemic?
I mean,
or do you think they were lingering all along and just kind of,
I feel like for most people, they like to say that it was 100% COVID, but I mean, I think it's probably most likely that these problems were already there, and that they're brought forth, they're sprung forth very, very quickly when COVID happened. It kind of caused everybody to start panicking more, and there's not much to say about that.
I understand.
I think everybody can kind of understand.
I'm sure people have, can understand generally, but I'm sure all of our scenarios are very different.
There are definitely people out there who have been affected worse than me.
But, and then again, people that have been affected way less than you.
Yes.
And
yes.
We can all tell our stories from that. Now, I know, and this is personally, so you won't really know most about this, but you are living with your younger brother. And you are living also, in fact, very closely together during this pandemic, and he is in high school and you are, out of high school. So do you feel like, because of the circumstances that you are in, that you've talked about, do you feel like your presence and reaction to this pandemic has greatly impacted him? And do you also feel, in contrary, does his experience with this pandemic and all of its effects to his personal life, do they coincide with each other, or do they clash with each other, and negatively or positively?
That's a great question. Now, I can't speak for how his COVID experience is, because I work most of the day and he's at home on Zoom, or in his high school classes. So I can't really speak on how his experience is, but I can only hope that maybe how I reacted has an effect on him. Okay. I'm noticing patterns. He's 18. I'm 20. He's 18. I'm noticing patterns from when I was 18 where I wouldn't really always jump. Like nowadays, I usually try to jump to the most moral conclusion about anything.
Okay.
Hayden doesn't really do. My brother Hayden doesn't really do that. Just like how I wouldn't do that, because it's just not in the. It's because you need to really experience something real and raw like this happening in front of your very own eyes. To kind of wake up and realize that you shouldn't be worrying about meaningless things.
And I'm sure definitely, even as small, it is the age factor of you
It
being
is,
20
yeah.
And him still being in high school has
And
affected
also
that.
definitely because I think I'd like to believe that I've been through a lot more. Working for talking to the people that I've talked to. I've talked to thousands. I must have talked to thousands of people over the course of however long I've been working. But I think that's definitely the difference. Because having a real world a real world job.
Of course,
I think that's the main difference. You're open to seeing how the world really is in front of you. When you're trapped in your bedroom all day on Zoom, you don't know what's happening. Like I'm in the real world every day, seeing everything happen around me as it's happening. Hayden's in his room seeing it from Twitter. Yeah.
Specifically, just in your worldview, that times in America right now for you as a youth group in this current present of 20 have been more severe or less severe than, say, times for your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents experiencing their own walks of life in a youth of 20. And before you answer that, let me get more into that. I'm not talking about specifically economic or societal problems. I'm not talking about issues of money. I'm simply talking about the culminescence of being a youth in a society right now that is still developing. So, obviously your grandparents would have very different experiences from that. So I wanted you to share your exact.
I mean, if you're exempting anything, economical or political, I suppose that this probably is one of the greatest generations to be a youth. We have all of these very strong figures in our society who speak for us and have a stance in the known, pool of information. People who people look up to, people our age look up to, and we have more. Not only do we have more equality, we have more, ethic to, I think, get out there and work and try to, make the best out of the world around us. Generations like the one before and even the one before that is just, there wasn't these steps that were being taken to get to where we are now were still happening. You know what I mean? Like this future is the future that I think everybody in America wanted 30, 40 years ago, but they were still working to get it done. So they were laying the groundwork, and then we are the children of the people who got the world they wanted.
Let me just add on to that. Do you think right now this is, as you're saying the question, that this is the end goal? Or do you think there's more to be done?
There's always more to be done.
Okay.
There's always more to be done, but this is I think we're at the basics of what was wanted. Equality between most people. I think we can agree that by now we have a general everything's okay. There's always conflict.
Yeah.
For example, the Civil War never went away, and it probably won't for a while. We're still dealing with the problems with the people in this, in the Civil War. But if I can just mention, every generation of people has always had tough country conflict. This is probably the scariest that's happened, maybe in recent time, but there was always something going on in America that was scary for everybody. There was always conflict. There's always tension. Okay. It was never away. It was always there.
For you specifically, do you feel more or less hopeful for the next generation to come after us? Sorry, the ones that are still, being in kindergarten right now and being in elementary school. From what you've seen of how things have evolved and how they've been influenced and how we've been influenced, do you feel more or less hopeful for them looking after us once we get to an age where we can? support ourselves.
I'm noticing this year that the smart people in the country are starting to speak up a little bit. We saw that during the election. The people who know what they're doing are starting to actually speak up, and so to that, I think maybe we have some hope that the next generation comes out better than us. But I mean, from what I can see now, and I'm very experienced, on the internet, and I can kind of see patterns and how people act, and just what people are doing. I can see what they're and I just don't have much hope.
You don't have much hope in the next generation.
I mean, just the way it is now. Like you said, the future's unforeseeable, but just the type of youth that I'm seeing on the internet is just not giving me too much hope.
Do you think that?
I think it's not the fault of the children. It's definitely on the fault of the parents.
Okay.
I mean, it has to be, right? I mean, the kids, you can't blame kids for being a shitty person when they're like
that
8,
young.
when they're like 8.
Yeah.
But I mean, all I can say is that I hope that the future will look bright.
Again, this is Ethan Suddy. He's a close friend of mine, and he lives in San Diego, and he's dealing with this current pandemic as much as anybody else is
Yep.
right now. So, thank you. See you next time.